Welcome to Twilight Fables, where the stories you thought you knew take a darker path through the woods. Tonight's tale is one of obsession, reflection, and the hunger behind beauty. This is the story of Snow White, fairest of the flesh. The mirror was not always in the Queen's possession. It had belonged once to a woman with no face, a forgotten queen whose people vanished beneath glass sands. It had passed through ruins and fire, temples and tombs, always seeking a voice vain enough to feed it and hands foolish enough to trust it. When Queen Lysandra found it in the belly of a crumbling tower, half buried under soot and bones, it was already whispering her name. She did not ask who had trapped it there. She did not wonder why it remained unbroken after all these years. She only asked, "Am I beautiful?" And the mirror, with its frame of molten silver and blurred veined glass, replied, "More than most, but not yet enough." So she fed it. Peasant girls vanished from nearby villages. Court ladies aged strangely. The Queen's beauty never waned. Her skin stayed white as bleached parchment, her lips a soft plum red, her hair glimmered with jet shadows, and her waist never thickened, not even after childbirth. But her daughter, they said, would be even lovelier. Snow White was born in the dead of winter, her first breath rising like mist through a broken window. Her mother, the Queen's only sister, bled out in silence, her body too fragile for both birthing and betrayal. Lysandra took the child without question. She gave her niece a cradle of bone lace and snow silk. She gave her a name that meant purity, frost, and possession, Snow. By the time the girl turned 7, servants began to speak of her beauty. At 10, they whispered that her smile stopped conversations. At 12, even nobles dared not compliment the Queen in Snow's presence. And at 14, Lysandra heard the words she'd long dreaded from the mouth of the mirror itself. "She is the fairest." The Queen did not scream or weep. She only stood in her marble chamber, lit by cold braziers and the flickering of a storm, and pressed her nails into her palms until crescent moons of blood dotted her skin. The mirror had spoken in its usual voice, smooth as breath on glass, low as the shifting of bones. But there was something else in it now, something eager. Lysandra glared at her reflection. She is a child. She is ripe. The word crawled across the glass, not said, but breathed. The Queen turned away, muttering incantations that had once silenced entire rooms. The mirror said nothing more. It only reflected her, slightly off, a version of herself with lips too wide, teeth too even, and eyes that glittered like dead stars. Snow was not vain, not yet. She was curious, quiet. She fed the birds from the palace windows and knelt to whisper to frogs in the pond. She often spoke to herself, as children do, imagining grand tales and faraway places. But on the morning of her 15th birthday, something changed. She stood at the mirror in the Queen's private hall, the forbidden one, the one with no reflection unless asked, and found herself watching back. Her hair, once a tumble of curls, had grown long and smooth like a ribbon of night. Her face was losing its softness, her cheekbones sharpening like ivory. Her skin glowed unnaturally white in the moonlight, and in her reflection, her eyes blinked after she did. She stared. The mirror did not crack, it did not fog or distort, but her image stood still for a fraction too long. "Who's there?" she whispered. Nothing answered, but the air thickened around her, and her own breath grew slower, not panicked, but lulled, as if something had begun breathing with her. The Queen's voice startled her from behind. "You are not to enter this room without me." Snow turned, flushing. "I'm sorry. I thought it was a normal mirror." "It's not." "What does it do?" The Queen moved toward her slowly, fingers trailing the obsidian banister. Her robes whispered like dead leaves. "It tells truths," she said, but not gently. Snow's eyes flicked back to the mirror. Her reflection stood between them now, still and lifeless, not mimicking either. "Is it magic?" "No." The Queen's smile never reached her eyes. "It's ancient. Magic obeys rules. This does not." She wrapped an arm around Snow's shoulder too tightly. "You must never come here again." That night, Snow dreamt of the mirror, but in the dream, it was not hanging in a cold stone hall. It stood in her room, on a frame of knotted legs, and the glass pulsed like skin. When she touched it, her fingers sank in, and she heard a voice, not her own, whisper, "Do you want to be loved, truly loved? Then you must be seen." She awoke, breathless, her cheeks flushed. The sun had not yet risen. The wind outside howled as if something hunted through the trees. She should have dismissed the dream. She tried to, but 2 days later, she returned to the mirror. The Queen was away, gone to the mountain chapel, where she performed her cleansings. Snow walked barefoot through the palace in a trance. Her skin tingled with static. Her ears rang. When she stepped into the mirror chamber, it greeted her, not with sound, but a shift in temperature, a coiling warmth that ran up her legs and down her spine. Her reflection smiled. She had not smiled. She stepped forward. Her breath fogged on the glass, but her reflections did not. And then, softly, a voice inside her mind. "You are more than her." Snow shivered. "Who?" "The one who keeps me chained. You are the fairest, not because they say it, because you feel it, don't you?" Her heart raced. Her lips parted. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no either. The mirror brightened. Her reflection began to move its hands slowly, lifting them to its face, tracing the jaw, the lips, the eyes. Snow followed, mimicked, or maybe she didn't. Maybe it did first, and then it spoke, not aloud, but through her bones. "If you want to be more than a shadow, You must feed me one thing small. Her hair moved on its own. A single strand lifted. Snow reached up, pulled the strand free, and let it fall onto the glass. The mirror inhaled. She didn't know how she knew, but she felt it, like a long, slow breath through her veins. A cold warmth, wrong and sweet, like syrup on rot. Come again soon, it whispered. Bring more. Snow staggered out, dazed and dizzy. Her hands trembled, but her skin glowed. Servants whispered that night that she looked radiant. The queen returned the next morning and stared long into the mirror. It would not speak to her, not any more. Snow tried not to return to the mirror. She truly did. She willed herself to avoid the queen's northern wing, forbade her feet from stepping into those cold halls. She wandered the gardens instead, let the chill wind bite her cheeks, buried her hands in frostbitten soil until her fingers numbed. But nothing felt real anymore. Food tasted dull, music rang hollow, faces blurred together, and time seemed to fold like parchment. She would wake with the scent of glass in her hair. Sometimes she found hair missing in patches or scratches on her collarbone that she didn't remember making. When she spoke, people listened, but not because of what she said. They stared, they lingered, they smiled too long. She was changing, and in the queen's eyes, that change was poison. It began with gifts, jewels with thorns tucked in the silk lining, perfume that burned her skin, gloves stitched too tight, lined with bristles that drew blood. Snow said nothing. She had grown used to silence. The mirror had taught her that words were less important than looks, that adoration came not from sound, but shape, gaze, presence. The queen spoke less and watched more. Then one morning, a new maid came to dress her, silent, soft-handed. She weaved Snow's hair with silver pins, brushed her shoulders clean of imaginary dust. Then she whispered, "They're sending you to the woods." Snow turned. Who? The maid's eyes flickered toward the window, where the queen stood in the garden speaking to a tall man in a leather coat. He was built like a soldier, but didn't stand like one. There was a weariness to his posture, a slouch that came from years of carrying out orders he regretted. "The huntsman," the maid whispered. "He always comes when the queen wants things quietly handled." They left at dawn. No fanfare, no escort, just Snow White, bundled in a cloak too thin for winter, and the huntsman, silent and stone-eyed, riding a black horse that never once looked back. Snow said nothing. She already knew. She had seen this moment in the mirror, not as prophecy, but as expectation. The mirror had said, if you want to be loved, you must be missed. If you want to be missed, you must vanish. Snow wasn't sure if she believed that, but the mirror was. So she walked beside the huntsman with quiet steps, each one crunching frost, her breath curling like smoke. They reached the forest by mid-morning, a dense, bramble-choked sprawl of black trees and gnarled roots. The path faded after only 10 paces, and beyond it, only shadows. The huntsman stopped. "This is far enough," he muttered. She turned to him. "Are you going to kill me?" He looked at her, startled, not because she asked, but because she sounded unafraid. "I was told to make it painless," he said. "A knife to the heart, no suffering. Do you always do what you're told?" "No," he said, drawing the blade. "Just what I'm paid for." Snow stepped closer. The wind whispered through the trees like a hush. He raised the knife, slowly, like it weighed too much. And then he paused, because she didn't flinch. She didn't cry, beg, run, or plead. She tilted her head and smiled. The huntsman dropped the knife. "Gods forgive me," he said, backing away, his eyes wide with confusion. "You're not right." Snow said nothing. He turned, ran, and vanished into the trees, leaving the blade in the snow and the girl alone. Or so he thought. Snow bent to pick up the knife. Her fingers closed over the hilt. The metal felt wrong. It resisted her touch, as if blades had a loyalty to the one who forged them. But something else did not resist. A shadow moved beside her, not cast by light, but by something deeper. A ripple in the air, like melted wax forming shape, and the mirror's voice whispered through the bark and wind. "Well done, my fairest." Snow walked deeper into the forest. It welcomed her. The trees bent slightly as she passed. Crows watched from the branches with heads cocked, unblinking. Snow touched one trunk, and it shivered. The path wound in knots. Her feet bled. She did not feel it. She did not need to eat, though her stomach ate. She came upon a river that murmured like sleep. In its surface, she saw not her reflection, but the queen's, aged, panicked, holding the mirror and screaming into it. Snow smiled. She walked for hours, days, maybe weeks. Time ceased to hold shape. The woods bent around her in a loop of grey, and then she saw it, a cottage nestled among dark toadstools and bone-coloured vines, its chimney smoking faint blue. The windows were shuttered, the door hung slightly ajar. She approached. Inside, it was still. Dust floated in shafts of pale light. The hearth glowed with low fire. A long table stretched down the centre of the room, set with 7 empty bowls, 7 forks, 7 napkins, all bone white and unused. She saw no one, but she felt them, not above, not below, but around. There was a perfume in the air, cloying, floral, sharp, like rot disguised with roses. Snow stepped inside, and the moment she crossed the threshold, the door shut behind her. They came from the walls, not dwarfs, not men, 7 figures, tall and narrow, like willows in winter, gaunt and angular, their limbs too long, their faces flawless, but motionless, as if carved from porcelain and forgotten mid-expression. Their eyes were black mirrors, their mouths never opened. They circled her. One stepped forward, not with menace, but awe. Then, together, they knelt. Snow did not understand, until the mirror's voice came, now not from glass, but from within her blood. "These are my first," Snow staggered. The mirror chuckled, soft and slow. "They fed me long ago. Each begged to be the fairest. Each offered something precious, a face, a voice, a memory. I gave them beauty. Now they serve." The seven rose. One handed her a comb made of silver teeth, another a dress that shimmered like black water, a third a basin filled with dark milk that steamed with scent. Snow touched none of it. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. "Not want," the voice said. "We have chosen you. You will be my vessel. You will be loved, adored, craved. But you must give. You must shed your softness, your shame. You must let go." "Of what?" The fire dimmed. "Of what makes you lesser, and that begins with your name." Snow stepped back. Her hands trembled, but her reflection, shimmering in a silver platter across the room, remained still. And in it, she was not Snow White. She was taller, sharper. Her hair was smoke, her lips scarlet, her eyes mirrors, and she was smiling. The dress fit too perfectly. Snow stood still as the seven figures clothed her, not with hands, but with gliding, precise movements that suggested no seams, no pulling, no struggle. The black dress wrapped around her like smoke, and silk spun from night itself. It clung to her skin as if it had always been part of her. When it was done, she hardly recognized herself. Her pale skin looked whiter than ever against the dark fabric. Her collarbones cast delicate shadows. Her hair, once curling and wild, now flowed behind her in an unbroken wave, slick and dark as spilled ink. She looked like the Queen. No, she looked beyond the Queen, like the Queen's memory of herself, made crueler and lovelier. The seven stood in a half circle behind her, unmoving. They had no names. Snow felt that instinctively. They were not people anymore, but shapes, reflections that had been kept alive past the point of identity. The mirror spoke again, but not aloud. It breathed through the very walls, the fire, the floor beneath her bare feet. It whispered in the tension of the air. "You look well, my fairest." Snow touched her cheek. "Is this what you want? Isn't it what you want?" She hesitated. The fire crackled. One of the seven moved forward and offered her a comb, silver, thin, shaped like a row of teeth. Snow took it without thinking, drew it through her hair. As she combed, memories passed through her fingers like threads. Her mother's laugh, half remembered, the smell of snow the night she was born, the Queen singing to her once, in a rare moment of calm, her own face, plain and flushed, before the mirror ever spoke. Each pull of the comb made her glow a little more. Each pull stole something. She knew, but she didn't stop. When she set the comb down, the mirror hummed. You've taken your first step. The world will love you, but you must feed me. Snow stared at the silver teeth of the comb. A single strand of hair clung to it, white and fine, and no longer her own. I don't understand what you are, she said quietly. The 7 turned their heads in perfect synchronicity toward the wall. It shifted. A sliver of the stone rippled like water, revealing a doorway she hadn't seen before, low, arched, and covered in frost. One of the 7 stepped forward and gestured. Snow followed. The hallway beyond the door was cold, lined with mirrors of every shape and age. Some cracked, some new, some warped into spirals and knots. Each reflected her in a different way. In one, she was older, her eyes hollow, her skin pulled tight like wax. In another, she was faceless. In another still, she was laughing as a crowd of people knelt around her, their eyes bleeding, their hands raised in worship. She did not flinch. Instead, she walked. At the end of the corridor stood a pedestal, and on it, a bowl of polished bone filled with dark liquid. It smelled of rust and violets. A blade rested beside it. This is the first meal, the mirror murmured. Blood not taken, but given, willingly. Just a drop, just a taste. Snow picked up the blade. Her hand shook, but not from fear, from something else. A strange anticipation, like standing on a high ledge. She pressed the edge to her palm. One drop fell into the bowl. The room breathed. The mirrors rattled. The 7 murmured, not with words, but with wind. The dark liquid pulsed once, then vanished, gone, consumed. Snow's hand closed, sealing the cut. Already it was healing. Already she looked brighter. Her hair glinted with undertones of midnight. Her lips darkened like bruised petals. She exhaled. Yes, the mirror purred. Now we begin. That night, she dreamed of the queen. Lysandra stood before her own mirror, naked, skin blotched and peeling, her hands clawing at her face. She screamed. No sound came out. And behind her, in the mirror, stood Snow, smiling, perfect, untouched. The queen clawed at the glass, begging. Snow reached out from within it and took her place. She awoke, gasping, heart racing, and found that her bed was gone. She lay in a nest of silk and ash. The walls of the cottage had vanished. Only the hearth remained, and the 7 figures standing at each corner of a perfect circular room. She sat up. Something had changed. Her teeth felt sharper, her fingers more precise, like an artist's. When she spoke, her voice echoed differently. Where am I? Between, said the mirror. You are becoming. Snow rose and walked to the fire. Her reflection shimmered in the flames, but this time it looked back with recognition, not mimicry. The reflection smiled. Snow didn't. Outside It was always twilight. The forest wrapped around the cottage like a closed fist. Snow tried to leave once, only once. She stepped beyond the door, past the mushroom-ringed path, into the trees. Each step away made her weaker. Her skin grew brittle, her hair dulled, her sight blurred. She stumbled, fell, reached back, and the forest pushed her home, not with branches, not with hands, with memory. Suddenly she was a child again, lost and freezing, clutching at a dead maid's cloak. Then she was 14, bleeding from a torn dress and the Queen's sharp ring. Then she was 15, in the mirror room, smiling as her eyes blinked out of sync. And then she was home, back in the circle of silk and fire. The 7 waited, the mirror waited. You may not leave until you are whole. Snow did not weep. She learned. She let the 7 brush her hair with glass bristles, trim her nails with bone scissors, feed her petals soaked in ink. She stopped dreaming. She began remembering faces, maids, cooks, nobles, all those who had once looked at her with envy, kindness or lust, and she whispered each name into a bowl of mirror water, and each name vanished from her memory, swallowed by the liquid. She grew lovelier each time, but the names never returned. The mirror never gave back. One night, the 7 brought her a red box. Inside was a heart, still beating, not human, not animal, something in between, something made of light and shadow, pulse and frost. This, said the mirror, is the Queen's. Snow recoiled. She still lives. Yes, but she is mine. The heart pulsed again, slower, fainter. Do you want her crown? Snow looked at her hands. They were too perfect now, too smooth. They looked carved, not born. She touched her face. It did not feel like hers. Her voice was calm. Yes, the Queen, far away, woke with a scream. In her bed, she felt a sharp pain in her chest. She stumbled to her mirror. It would not show her reflection. It only showed a girl with black hair and blood-red lips, surrounded by 7 shadows, and all of them were smiling. The Queen bled, but not visibly. Her skin bore no wound. No blade had touched her, and yet she limped through the corridors of her palace, as if her heart had been grazed by frost. Her chambers were too quiet. Her servants walked with lowered eyes. Her food tasted of ash. The mirror still stood on its pedestal, but when she demanded answers, it stayed silent. It no longer replied to her questions, no longer flattered her. She slapped its surface hard enough to cut her palm. The blood ran down the glass and vanished into it. Still, no reflection appeared. In the forest, Snow White was awake, utterly, terrifyingly awake. Each sense had sharpened beyond recognition. She could smell the mould under the floorboards, hear the 7's joints creak when they tilted their heads. She could taste the iron in the firelight. She could even see herself from behind, on occasion, not as a vision or a dream, but as a momentary shift in perspective, as if the mirror now looked out through her eyes as well as into them. She was never truly alone anymore, and that brought a strange, cold comfort. That morning, the mirror spoke to her before she could rise from her nest of ash-laced silk. "Your queen begins to rot." Snow opened her eyes. "She's still alive." "Yes, but frightened. She claws at the idea of youth like a beast. She forgets that beauty is not stolen, it is sacrificed." Snow sat up slowly. She no longer ached. She no longer dreamed. Sleep had become a formality. "I'm ready," she said. "What's the next step?" The fire flared. "You must offer me something meaningful, not memory, not name, but flesh." Snow did not flinch. "What part?" "Your tongue," her breath caught. "But not all of it," the mirror soothed. "Just enough to cost you, just enough to mark the moment." The seven stepped forward as one. The same porcelain figure who'd brought her the bone basin now carried a blade. It was not metal. It was glass, obsidian, thin as a whisper. Snow took it. She did not cry. She did not ask what she would sound like afterward. She drew the blade across the underside of her tongue, a quick, decisive flick, and caught the sliver of severed flesh in her palm. It pulsed faintly. She placed it on the silver tray beside her, and it melted into the metal like wax. The pain was brief. The numbness afterward, longer. When she tried to speak, her voice sounded the same, but thinner, echoed. The mirror laughed gently. "You will find, soon, that what you say no longer matters. You will be understood." Snow didn't reply. She didn't need to. The seven brought her a cup of something pale and sweet. It tasted of smoke and milk. It healed her, but it also silenced the last warmth in her chest. She didn't miss it. Not yet. In the palace, Queen Lysandra grew desperate. The silence of her mirror was not only insulting, it was terrifying. For years, it had told her she was the fairest. For years, it had guided her, preserved her, fed from her offerings. Now it would not even look at her. She summoned her best alchemists, her hidden priests, her oldest grimoire binders. None could rouse it. One scholar, blind in both eyes, said only, "The mirror has chosen again." The queen had him flayed. Then she went to the royal crypts, where she kept jars of preserved youth, the bile and blood of girls, sacrificed in secret rituals. She smeared it across her skin, whispered the old rhymes, invoked the river gods. Still, her hands ached with age, her neck sagged, her hair thinned. She broke 6 mirrors in her chambers that night, but not the 7th. That one remained untouched. It watched. Snow wandered deeper into the cottage. She discovered that the space expanded as needed. One day there were 4 rooms, then 7, then 10. Each time she woke, new corridors had unfolded like petals. One door led to a garden of white vines that wept milk. Another to a stairwell of mirrors descending into shadow. A third led to a room she did not enter. She could hear weeping behind it. Her own voice, but older, more raw. It called to her, begged. She kept that door shut. The 7 never spoke, but they watched. And sometimes, just sometimes, she saw her face in all of theirs, like it had started seeping into them, like her beauty was replacing what little remained of their own. Another day, or perhaps a week, the mirror summoned her again. She felt it before it spoke, a pressure behind her teeth, a humming in her bones. She stood before the hearth. Its voice slithered across her spine. "You are ready for your second offering." She tilted her head. "What now?" "You must feed me another's image." "What do you mean?" "One who once made you feel small, one who eclipsed you, one whose gaze made you invisible. Take them, bind them, bring them here." Snow's thoughts drifted like mist and settled on a girl named Lys, a noble's daughter, beautiful, arrogant, always flanked by courtiers. Once she'd laughed when Snow spilled ink on her own dress. Once she had told Snow she would never outshine the queen. Snow smiled faintly. "She lives in the palace." "For now," the mirror purred. The cottage opened its front door for her, for the first time since she'd entered it. Outside, the forest was different, not wild, but waiting. The path ahead glowed faintly with a silver sheen. Snow walked barefoot. The trees leaned back. The air hummed with her name. She reached the palace before dawn. She did not knock. She did not climb. She appeared, stepping through the hedge maze, as if the earth had parted for her. Guards didn't see her. Servants passed by, none meeting her eye. Only one did, Lys. She stood in the rose garden, arms crossed, speaking to a handmaiden, complaining of the queen's sour moods, no doubt. When she saw Snow, her mouth opened. You. That was all she said, because Snow took her hand and Lys fell silent. Her eyes glazed, her breath stopped, her body stayed standing, but her soul. Snow turned. Lys followed. They walked back into the woods, one by will, the other by spell. In the cottage, the 7 made space. Snow brought Lys to the mirror. She did not plead. She did not scream. The moment her reflection appeared, it began to leak into the mirror, dragged out like smoke pulled through a keyhole. Lys aged. Years passed across her face in seconds. Her hair greyed, her skin sagged, her lips cracked, and when it was done, she was a husk, breathing, but forgotten. Snow kissed her forehead. "You were wrong." Lys fell asleep on the floor and did not wake. Snow's beauty deepened. Her hair sparkled with silver threads. Her eyes burned. The mirror whispered, "You are becoming." And in the queen's chambers, the 7th mirror cracked, just once, along its centre. The queen clutched her chest and began to weep, not out of grief, but because she knew the sound. The mirror had cracked for Snow. The queen's palace had grown silent. Once, servants scurried like ants under her watchful gaze, and courtly laughter echoed down gold-lined halls. Now only whispers and footsteps dared disturb the air. Mirrors were covered with velvet drapes. The glass had turned against her. She no longer dared to consult it. In the mornings, she painted her face with trembling hands. Rouge to mimic youth, kohl to sharpen her eyes, powder to mask the mottled grey, creeping down her neck like mildew. The skin on her hands had begun to flake, papery and dry, and her bones jutted too close to the surface. She was no longer the fairest. The words had not been spoken aloud in weeks, yet they gnawed at her like a rat beneath the floorboards. The mirror was quiet, but its judgment had been final. Snow White lived, and with each day she drew breath. The queen withered faster. She needed new skin, fresh, young, beautiful. She summoned a maid one morning, a girl of 15, with flaxen hair and doe-like eyes. The queen offered a brush and asked her to sit by the mirror. The girl complied, trembling slightly. "You remind me of someone," the queen murmured, running the brush through her hair. The girl smiled faintly. "Princess Snow White, perhaps, Your Majesty?" The queen smiled too. "Yes, just so." She slit the girl's throat with the hairpin, wiped the mirror clean with her blood, and sewed the face over her own. But it didn't hold. The skin slid down like melted wax. The mirror refused the offering. The queen screamed and clawed at her reflection, furious and afraid. "You gave her your favour," she snarled at the veiled glass. "You chose her, but I bore the weight. I bled for you. I fed you beauty for decades." No answer, only her own gaunt face, stretched thin over trembling bones. In the forest, Snow sat beside the fire, combing her fingers through her now silver hair. The mirror had not asked for it. She had given it freely. It shimmered like starlight, but her scalp itched raw where the strands had been pulled away. She barely noticed any more. The 7 shadows moved in their usual rhythm. Whisper scuttled about with her bird-like motions, hiding her face behind a curtain of raven feathers. Glimmer wept in corners, leaving shimmering trails of salt across the bark. Crick twisted his limbs like a marionette, always dancing, always laughing. They never spoke of what they had given up. Only Ember ever came close. He sat with Snow by the fire, silent, except for the crackling of flames in his breath. His eyes still held a hint of humanity beneath the ash, a kindling that had not yet gone out. "You've been feeding it," he said one night. Snow nodded. "Yes." He looked at her. "It takes more each time." Snow lowered her gaze to her hands. The skin along her forearm was flawless, but not hers. It had been smooth and pink once. Now it gleamed like porcelain, cold, perfect, dead. "But I've never been more beautiful," she whispered. "Is that what you want?" "I want to be worthy." The fire popped, flinging a stray spark into the dark. Ember watched it fade. "It will leave nothing of you, Snow." Snow didn't answer. She had begun to dream in mirrors. whole rooms made of reflection. She would walk through them barefoot, her body trailing light and blood, and see hundreds of versions of herself, young, old, twisted, hollow. The mirror always stood at the centre, its frame made of ribs, its mouth open. It called to her in her own voice, and she obeyed. The queen had gone mad, not quietly, not in the way of trembling hands or whispered ramblings. No, hers was a grand madness, a royal unravelling. She scoured villages for beautiful girls and invited them to the palace under pretence of employment or celebration. None returned, and still the mirror remained silent until, one night, she pulled away the velvet cover in desperation and saw not herself, but snow, not as she had been, as she was now. White hair like starlight, lips like polished garnet, skin like the moon, smooth and pale, stretched just shy of unnatural, eyes that did not blink. The queen screamed. She struck the glass, but it did not shatter. Her own reflection stared back at her from behind snows, wrinkled, hollow, dying. "You are not real," she shrieked. The mirror pulsed with light, then become something more. She fell to her knees. Snow knew the queen was coming before she arrived. The shadows grew restless. Glimmer vanished into the trees, keening. Whittle buried herself beneath the roots. Even Ember stepped back into the flame-ring circle at the edge of their glade. Only Snow remained still. She sat at the centre, cross-legged, the mirror propped before her on a pedestal of bone and root. She watched herself. The mirror had begun to show her things now. The queen stalking the woods in a cloak of stolen skin, hearts beating beneath floorboards, the apple gleaming red, cradled in a box lined with silk. The queen arrived after sunset. She wore the shape of a crone, the disguise she'd worn once before, long ago. But now it was not a costume. It was her only skin that did not fall off in strips. She held the apple out to Snow. "Daughter," she rasped, "I've come to make peace." Snow tilted her head. "I am not your daughter." The queen's lips cracked into a brittle smile. "Then take this as an offering. Let us both be free of it." Snow reached out, her fingers trembling. The apple was warm. It smelled like honey and blood. "This is poison," she said flatly. The queen didn't deny it. "You'll fall asleep. The mirror will reject you. I'll be queen again." Snow looked at the mirror. It pulsed with hunger. It wanted her to eat it, not to die, but to complete the offering. She met the queen's eyes. "I accept." She bit. It was not sleep. It was ecstasy. Fire filled her veins. Not pain, not numbness, but glory. The mirror opened inside her. She felt every nerve turn to gold. Her spine arched. Her eyes burned white. Her skin split and reformed. The queen stepped back, horrified. "No! You were supposed to..." "Ah!" Snow stood. Not Snow, not fully. Something else now. The mirror pulsed and the shadows gathered. Whispers sang. Crick danced. ember fell to his knees. Snow looked down at the Queen. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft as crushed silk. The Queen turned to run. Snow reached out, and the shadows obeyed. They found the Queen days later, curled beneath a fallen tree, muttering to herself. "She took it all. I gave the apple, but she became the tree." They took her back to the palace. She never spoke again, but the mirror in her chamber shone brighter than ever before, and in its centre Snow White smiled. The wind had teeth that day, sharp and chattering as it sliced through the woods. Snow stood barefoot in the frost-bitten moss outside the cottage, her body wrapped in the cloak of a girl who no longer existed, one of the 7, now dissolved into the mirror's memory. The air smelled of copper and crushed berries. Her fingertips were pale as porcelain, nails stained with something darker than blood. In the distance, hooves, a carriage perhaps, or a hunter, or worse, the Queen herself. Snow's heart did not flutter. It no longer remembered how. The mirror had taken that too. Some time after her voice, what remained of her soul existed in smooth, polished fragments now, held in an unseen glass so flawless it cast no reflection. And yet she still ached, a dull, deep longing that pulsed beneath the perfection. Inside, the 7 waited. What was left of them, ash curled in the fireplace. Fern sat by the window, staring into the grey sky. His face, no longer moving unless prompted. Lilac was just bones now, her beauty stored in the mirror's vault like a pressed flower. Dovetail had begun to whisper in riddles, lips forming perfect smiles that never reached his eyes. They had welcomed her transformation, applauded it even, one more shard of perfection to join their fractured little world. Snow closed her eyes, and then the knock, not at the door, not on wood, but on her mind. "It is time," the mirror said, "the final offering, the final perfection." Her breath fogged the air, barely. Her skin did not feel cold, though she knew it should. She stepped back inside. The others rose like puppets, silent, anticipating. She walked past them, into the back room, where the mirror waited, black glass now, like a still pond with no bottom. It did not reflect her face anymore, only her shape shifting, half there. At its base, wrapped in silk, like a gift, was the apple. She did not ask where it came from. She already knew. The apple was impossibly red, not merely crimson, but the kind of red that whispered of buried lust, forbidden things, and the last gasp of something dying. It pulsed faintly, a beat, a lure, its skin smooth as enamel. She held it in both hands. "Is this my crown?" she asked, though the words only echoed in her skull. "It is your ascension," the mirror said. "The old must die, Snow. You are a girl. You are becoming. This bite is not the end. It is the beginning." She raised it to her lips. Her reflection rippled behind the fruit's curve, and for the first time in weeks, she saw her own eyes, not her flesh, not her beauty, her flickering, faint. Was she still inside? Her hands trembled, and then the door to the cottage burst open. Snow turned. The Queen stood in the threshold, hooded, cloaked in black, a dagger in hand, and her own beauty decaying around her like rotted lace. Her cheekbones were visible beneath paper-thin skin, lips caved inward, eyes furious and sunken. "You took it from me," the Queen hissed, stepping forward. "My face, my skin, my voice. You drank what I fed that thing for decades. And now you think you deserve it?" Snow said nothing. The Queen's fingers twitched around the blade. Behind her, the seven began to move, not to help Snow, nor to flee, but to watch, silently, gleefully, like dolls at a puppet show. "I was made for the mirror," the Queen spat, "and it was made for me." She lunged. The apple fell. It struck the floor and cracked. From within, something white and writhing leaked out. Tendrils, tiny and glistening like translucent worms, wriggling across the floor towards Snow's feet. They sought her flesh, her warmth, her yes. Snow hesitated. The Queen's blade slashed across her shoulder, but before she could scream, the mirror screamed for her. A high, warping sound like shattered glass and a child's laugh. The Queen shrieked, blood bursting from her ears, and fell to her knees. "It lied to you too," Snow whispered, voice cracking through invisible walls. "You were never the fairest. You were only the first." The mirror pulsed. The apple's flesh swirled and rose. It sought a host. Snow bent and pressed her lips to it. The moment the apple touched her tongue, she remembered everything. Every lie, every promise, every time she'd begged to be seen, to be enough, to be chosen. The mirror had heard her even as a child. It had whispered to her in every polished spoon, every surface she'd stared into, wondering what it would take to be loved more. And now she knew the price. She swallowed. Her bones straightened, spine tightening like silk on a loom. Her skin flushed rose gold, porcelain blooming with impossible warmth. Her eyes glistened, and when she blinked, the Queen's reflection no longer appeared in the mirror, only Snow's. The seven knelt behind her, no longer mocking. They chanted something soft and wordless. Worship. The Queen crawled to the broken apple. She tried to eat what remained, but it recoiled from her, hissed, and fled into the cracks of the floorboards. Like spilled mercury, Snow stepped forward. "You fed it others," she said, voice clear, "but I gave it myself." The Queen wept, and when Snow knelt beside her, brushing back her hollowed cheek, it almost looked like pity. "Let me show you," Snow whispered, "what beauty really costs." She pressed her hand to the Queen's face, and peeled it away. It came off like a mask, paper thin, dry, flaking, revealing beneath it a featureless void. No eyes, no mouth, no self, just emptiness, where vanity used to live. The queen crumbled to dust. The 7 did not cheer, they only rose. Snow stood before the mirror and smiled. The sky above the cottage cracked with thunder, though no storm brewed. The trees surrounding the house bent inward, bowing to some invisible weight, as if the forest itself recognized the danger now clawing its way through the roots of the world. Snow White stood before the mirror, her reflection no longer a girl, but an artwork, her skin porous and smooth like porcelain, her hair spilling in ink-black waves, her eyes aglow with impossible light. She did not blink any more. The 7 sat in silent reverence around her, kneeling in a circle, their hollow eyes shimmering with the same mirrored sheen. What remained of their humanity had been long etched away, replaced with the same glassy hunger. They were not dwarfs, nor men, nor ghosts. They were the discarded scaffolds upon which the mirror had tested its aesthetics. Each of them had been beautiful once. Now they were cautionary ornaments in snow's ascent. The forest had grown quiet, too quiet. Even the crows had ceased their calls. She pressed a hand against the mirror's surface. It welcomed her touch, rippling like water. "You are nearly complete," it whispered, its voice like frost crawling up a window pane. "But there remains a flaw, a trace of you that clings like rot. He carries it, the prince." Snow tilted her head. She remembered him faintly, a boy with sea-washed eyes who once smiled at her across a garden wall, who once told her she smelled like apples. That memory stirred no heat now, no fluttering in the chest, only a dull sense of unfinishedness. She was no longer someone who could be loved like that. She was not made to be cherished, but displayed, worshipped, framed. "He searches for you. He thinks he can save you," the mirror continued, "but he carries a seed of ruin. If he sees you, truly sees what you have become, it will undo everything we've built. You must decide what you value more, his eyes or your perfection." Snow looked away from the mirror and stepped outside. The wind was wrong. There was no bird song, but the trees pulsed with something silent, electric. Then a sound. Hooves. A single horse galloping along the muddy forest path. Snow walked to the tree line and watched as he arrived. He was older now, his boyishness trimmed by time and grief. His royal cloak was frayed from travel, and his face, though handsome, bore the exhaustion of someone who had not slept properly in weeks. He dismounted slowly, his eyes scanning the clearing. "Snow?" he called out. "Snow White?" She stepped forward. He turned toward her, startled. For a heartbeat, recognition bloomed. Then confusion twisted his features. She was beautiful, that much was undeniable, but there was something off. something so finely crafted it lost the chaos that made beauty real. Her smile was too even. Her hair did not shift in the wind. Her skin held no freckles, no flush, no warmth. "Snow," he breathed again, unsure. She tilted her head, watching the play of emotion on his face. His gaze tried to hold on to the girl he once knew, but behind his eyes, the cracks began to show. His pupils trembled. "You've changed," he said softly. Snow opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. The mirror had taken her voice days ago, in exchange for the blood of a red fox. A fair trade. The creature had yelped once and then fallen still, and from it Snow gained silence. The perfect kind. No more stuttering, no more uncertainty, only poise. Still, she stepped toward him. Her bare feet did not rustle the grass. He took a step back. "You're not her," he whispered, something shattering in his tone. "What? What have you done?" Snow reached out and touched his cheek. He flinched but did not pull away. His skin was warm, real. The mirror stirred in her mind, impatient. "He sees the truth. You must choose my masterpiece. Break the seed of ruin before it blooms. Do not falter now." But her hand trembled. She wanted to be the fairest. That desire had long overtaken her hunger, her sleep, her soul. But there was a ghost in her, a girl with muddy shoes and laughter like chimes, who used to chase butterflies and sing to birds. The prince had loved that girl. She had once loved him back, hadn't she? Or was that only a reflection too? The mirror hissed. Its surface back at the cottage had begun to ripple violently. Hairline fractures spread across its edges. "He is killing you with his gaze," it snarled. "Your flaw will make you mortal again." The prince stepped back, suddenly reaching for something beneath his cloak. Snow's eyes narrowed. He drew a shard, a jagged piece of obsidian. No, not just obsidian, mirror glass. A sliver of another magic mirror, likely shattered long ago. He held it aloft like a dagger. "This was from her study," he said. "The Queen's mirror. Before she turned mad, she used this to feed her vanity. I've watched it poison her, twist her, and now I see it's poisoned you too." Snow stared at the fragment, transfixed. It pulsed with a hum identical to her own mirror, a sibling shard. He stepped forward slowly. "Come back with me. We'll find someone who can help. You don't have to be this. You don't have to be alone." She opened her mouth again. Still, no words, only a breath, a soft exhale like silk torn at the seam. "He will break you," the mirror screamed in her mind. "Kill him." Her body moved, not hers entirely. The glass beneath her skin surged forward, and her fingers lengthened, sharpened, like carved crystal. She lunged. The prince dodged. The shard in his hand gleamed as he slashed at her arm. Contact. Snow staggered back, where her porcelain arm had been. Cracks spidered outward. Her blood, silvery, too perfect, trickled down. She stared at it in horror. "You see," he said, grief thick in his voice. You're not whole anymore. Let go of it. Let me help you break the rest. Snow fell to her knees. The forest spun. The 7 shadows emerged from the woods, drawn by the fracture. Their bodies twitched and hissed as they dragged themselves forward, glass pulsing beneath their skin. They encircled the prince like vultures, hissing his doom. But Snow raised a hand, and they stopped. She turned to face the mirror, its presence suddenly surging through the trees from the cottage, its frame stretching impossibly tall, walking on 4 glistening legs made of fused limbs. It had become mobile, predatory, a stained glass spider of mirrors and bones. The Queen's mirror had left its home. It screamed, 1,000 broken voices in one. You are mine. You were made for me. The forest caught fire. Trees split. The ground cracked. The prince ran to Snow, trying to pull her away, but she wouldn't move. The mirror reached its great, shimmering limb toward her. Then Snow did the unthinkable. She turned, not toward the prince, not toward the beast, but inward. She plunged her own sharpened hand into her chest, shattering the perfect ribs beneath. The mirror's influence screamed as she ripped out the glass heart the mirror had placed within her. With her other hand, she reached for the prince's shard. Together, they plunged both fragments, the stolen piece and her cursed heart, into the mirror's nearest leg. The sound was deafening. A shriek erupted from the centre of the forest as the creature writhed, its panels cracking, its voices shorting out like blown circuits. The 7 shadows clutched their heads and screamed. Light exploded outward, 1,000 reflections shattering at once, then silence and darkness. Snow collapsed. The prince caught her. Her skin, once impossibly smooth, began to bloom with flaws. A freckle on her shoulder, a crooked scar at her wrist, the flush of blood returning. Her breath came in ragged gasps, but her eyes, when they opened, were her own again. The mirror, now a heap of broken shards and twisted metal, lay still. The forest sighed. The Queen's hands trembled as she stepped into the hall of glass, a forgotten chamber hidden deep within the castle's foundation. It was older than the throne room, older than the castle itself, a place of long forgotten rites. She had once found it as a child, led by a dream and the scent of jasmine and rot. The mirror had been waiting for her then, and it had promised her love in return for her youth. But now the walls had changed. Where once smooth stone reflected her grace, now jagged shards bloomed from every crevice, like thorned flowers made of splinters. The mirror stood at the far end, towering, cracked, humming with a feverish glow, and before it stood Snow. She was draped in a gown of threadbare beauty, once white, now red-streaked and silver-veined, with skin she no longer owned. Her face was unnaturally still, a doll's expression carved by reverence. Her lips were too red, her eyes too pale. Her hands had become porcelain claws, But the Queen knew it was still her little stepdaughter, the girl who once laughed at butterflies and wept when the court jester's bird died. "You look like me," the Queen said. Snow smiled thinly. "I look like what you wish to be. Is it still you in there?" the Queen whispered. "I am what the mirror reflects. Nothing more, nothing less." The Queen's heart beat faster, a slow staccato of fear and regret. She stepped forward, slipping the curved dagger from beneath her cloak, forged of obsidian and old blood, meant to sever pacts made with shadows. "You gave yourself to it," the Queen said, her voice cracking. "But I can undo it. I can break the bond." Snow's gaze flicked to the blade, then to her own reflection in the mirror. The glass shimmered. "Why would I want to be undone? Look at me." The Queen took another step. "Because you've lost everything that made you real." "No," Snow said, voice sharp as shattered crystal. "I've become real. This is who I was meant to be. This flesh, this perfection. The mirror didn't take me, it showed me. It offered what no one else could." "It lied to you," the Queen spat, "as it lied to me." A low, echoing voice rippled across the chamber. "I do not lie, I only reveal." The mirror pulsed with sickening light. The shards on the wall shivered, quivering like living things. Faces began to form in the glass, not just the Queen's or Snow's, but a multitude of others. Old vessels, lost beauties, those who tried and failed, and in the centre, a face that was neither Snow nor Queen. It was beautiful in a way that defied time. Perfect symmetry, timeless skin, features so flawless they felt alien. Snow turned to it. "Will you accept me fully now? Only one may remain, one may be eternal." Snow didn't hesitate. She turned toward the Queen with a graceful motion, lifting her hands. Her nails had grown long and glinted like glass shards. "It must be me." But the Queen raised the dagger. "No, Snow, not like this." They collided, elegance against desperation, grace against rage. The Queen ducked beneath Snow's lunge and plunged the blade forward, not at Snow's heart, but toward the mirror. The blade struck glass, and the world screamed. A sound split the chamber, like the wail of 1,000 dying swans. The mirror cracked, then burst outward in a shower of jagged light. Every reflection twisted in agony, then turned to ash. Snow shrieked, not in pain, but in loss. She clutched at her skin as it began to ripple and melt. The porcelain sheen flaked off. The symmetrical beauty warped. Her bones cracked audibly as they reshaped, unable to hold the perfection any longer. The Queen collapsed, bleeding from her palms and face where glass had sliced her, but she watched. Snow staggered backward, clutching her face. "No, no, you ruined it. I was almost complete." "You were almost gone," the Queen whispered. Snow fell to her knees. Her hair had dulled to its natural black, no longer touched with the mirror's glimmer. Her skin, once translucent like pearl, now showed bruises, wounds, and the toll of starvation. She looked so young again, and so human. Tears welled in her eyes, real ones now. I thought, if I was beautiful enough, I wouldn't be forgotten. The queen, trembling, crossed the space and knelt beside her. You were never forgotten. You were just growing. That's the part the mirror never told us. Beauty changes, it fades and comes back, but only if you're still here to feel it. Snow leaned into her, sobbing, and the queen held her like she never had before, not as a ruler, not as a rival, but as a woman who had once been a girl, afraid of time. The shards of the mirror still glittered around them, but they no longer hummed. The voice was silent. The reflections were gone. In its place remained only the cold stone of the chamber and two women breathing, broken but alive. In the weeks that followed, the castle changed. The servants returned from their sleep, confused, weak but whole. The vines around the walls receded, the roses bloomed again, and this time without faces. The 7 glass men never returned. Some said they were pieces of the mirror itself. Others believed they had become whole and wandered off into the world, finally free. Snow stayed. Her beauty never returned to its enchanted form, and she was grateful. She walked through the gardens each day with bare feet and dirt under her nails. When she looked in the pond, she saw herself, tired, pale, recovering, but real. The queen abdicated her throne. She left without fanfare, leaving only a crown made of twisted iron and broken mirror shards behind. No one knew where she went. Some say she went to the mountains. Others say she took the last piece of the mirror with her, seeking to bury it in a place light could never reach. As for the mirror's legend, it faded, but sometimes, when snow passed through certain rooms at night, she felt a tickle at the edge of her vision, a whisper in the dark glass of an old goblet, a shimmer in the silver handle of a comb. Who is the fairest of them all? And she would answer, always aloud, always steady, I am, because I'm still me. And the whisper would sigh, not angry, not jealous, just fading. For beauty that cannot feed is no beauty at all.